Let's talk about plants.
What's your favorite plant?
My favorite plant is nettles. I don't know what I'm saying that right now.
Nettles?
I don't know. I think it's nice. No, not nettles per se, but I like all plants that have a sort of purpose or medicinal property. It fascinates me. I'd love to know more about plants that can help me survive if I'm lost in the wild. Like I would love to learn one day, like, what type of plant can I look for in order to heal my injuries, or what plants are poisonous and what plants are beneficial for health.
Yeah.
That I would like to learn more about.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to learn because you need someone to teach you in the field, really.
I hope we learn more about plants with our guest today. This is iCRAGorama, the podcast where we talk about all things iCRAG.
With Anthea, Lacchia.
And Ben Couvin. Season 1, Episode 3.
And today we're joined by two guests.
Weimu Xu and Harry Yiotis.
So I guess to start, we could ask you about the project you're currently both working on together.
So yeah, it's an exciting collaboration between geoscientists, geologists, environmental engineers, and botanists from UCD, Trinity, but also from Australia currently. So we are using raw materials, in our case, volcanic ash, and we are trying to see the impact of ash fertilization of the soil on the plants. In our case, we're using ryegrass. Why ryegrass? Well, 60% of Ireland's landmass is agricultural grasslands, and perennial ryegrass is the most. 95% of all the seeds sold in the country is perennial ryegrass. So that's what we use here. So we picked this plant, and we are checking what are the effects of ash fertilization on ryegrass, and also what is also the effects of the plant and the plant's roots on the composition of the soil, on the weathering rate of the sand, and all this kind of exciting geochemical stuff, carbonate formation, etc.
Yeah, so as Harry mentioned, it's a multidisciplinary project involving different subjects, and iCRAG is really an ideal center for this project to be carried out. And iCRAG is funding our project, so it's a very nice experience for us as well.
Okay, so can you tell us more about the different aspects that you work on, Weimu, and then that you work on, Harry, and how you combine your expertise together?
Well, the project is so demanding experimentally that we have to work on all subjects together.
Yeah.
And this is amazing. It's a first for me to experience geochemical and geological research. And I guess it's the first for Weimu to start to work, well, not with rocks, but with living organisms. It's unbelievable because in these cases, it could be, working with either plants or animals. They actually decide about your experimental schedule. They will not wait for you when you're going to feel good to start measuring them. You have to measure them when they feel good. This means that, well, you have to work over time. You have to work during the weekends. Right? So I guess it's a very interesting experience for both of us.
Yeah, certainly for me, because I think Harry, coming from botany, is used to the idea of having a proper schedule of harvesting, watering of the experiment. While for me, working on geological materials, I can plan when I want to do my analysis, when I want to crush my rock. But now everything has to be scheduled and on plan. And with the two of us working on this together, it in a way helped it as well, because it's quite a demanding experiment. And with two people, knowing that there is another person working on this together, it's really helped.
Okay, and so have you collaborated together before, or is it first project?
No, first time.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, and how is it to collaborate with another scientist, especially not from your branch?
We learn from each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is the only way you can carry out multidisciplinary projects. Well, I'm a plant scientist, Weimu is a geologist. I do not claim that I'm a geologist, even though I have acquired some, good knowledge on, weathering, on carbonate formation, and carbon cycle. I knew some of this stuff on a theoretical level, but
Right.
now I can see it. I can see it happening. Right?
Yeah, for me as well, learning about ryegrass, about the leaves, the tailors, the root, and the photosynthesis rate, and etc. So it's really interesting experience and knowledge to have.
Yeah, I think it's the only way forward for science, because up to this point, when we're talking about unidisciplinary science, whatever was supposed to be done, it most likely has been done. We need to move to a multidisciplinary level now. When we add the different truths of different fields, the sum is going to be bigger than just the sum of them, right? We can reach the real truth. We can actually grasp what really goes on when we mix all these specialties, all these experiences of people working for different fields.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Also, when you consider the fact that if you have more skills, then you've got like the group becomes a kind of large individual with many skills, and you progress further really quickly.
True.
Yeah, it's the same with new ideas and just unexpected things you wouldn't think about.
Yeah, actually, the insights that somebody outside your field can give you are amazing, because when you keep working on the same thing, you learn to think in a certain way. So people coming from outside this field, they actually think out of the box, and they'll ask you questions which seem very simplistic, but in reality, you will never ask them yourself, because you are learning to focus on the details.
You're in your bubble.
Exactly, you're in your bubble, and I've seen that with Weimu, because when we were setting up and planning our experiment, she would drop some questions. I was like, damn, I never thought about that. Yeah. Let's pay attention in this thing too. Yeah.
Yeah, and also because our experiment is in a way seems straightforward, but it's also complicated with so many things that need to be considered. And for me, I would think of how the soils or the volcanic ash will behave, while Harry will think about how the plants, how do we maximize the plant growth. So really have to have the two of us sitting together and discuss all those things and think through it, that we can better design the experiment.
Yeah.
So can you tell me exactly, like in simple terms, what your experiment is exactly? So what are you doing in the lab, and what you're trying to achieve?
First of all, it is in a controlled chamber experiment, so we can control the temperature, CO2 level, humidity, light intensity throughout the day, and then we grow plants in soil in these tubes, and then with different controls, like with plants or without plants, with ash, without ash. So with these different controls, it allows us to really compare the fundamentals of these processes before any further progress with this concept. So it is straightforward in terms of the experiment, but in terms of the actual outcome, we still have to see with further analysis.
In a sense, we are studying the weathering capacity potential of ryegrass when it interacts with ash under both current and future elevated CO2 conditions. So we run our experiments under two different atmospheres. One is the current atmosphere, 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide. The other one is the likely atmosphere by the year 2100, so double ambient, 800.
With more CO2.
Yes, with more CO2. And it's not just CO2, more CO2 in the atmosphere, but we have also set up a system so that this CO2 also, reflects on the water that we give our plants. So in a way, we are also trying to simulate the rain under these two different regimes.
Right.
The rain will be different because, carbonic acid will be greater in a high CO2 atmosphere. We are simulating all these things, and we will try, we are still analyzing our results. We will see how this is going to change the weathering potential of ryegrass.
When you have volcanic ash in the soil, why would you expect that to change the weathering? Would it be more CO2 is absorbed somehow, or how does it work?
So for the volcanic ash, which is a basaltic silicate rock, it naturally will react with CO2 to form, for example, calcium or magnesium carbonate, which is a natural carbon sequestration processes. It's important to carbon sink over geological timescale. However, the rate is quite slow. So in order to enhance the carbon sequestration rate to mitigate climate change that we are experiencing now, we want to enhance this process. And with that, we think, oh, okay, maybe plants with the root interaction and the surrounding microorganisms, it will have impact on the chemistry that the volcanic ash is in, so that it will affect the rate of weathering.
The thing is that plants exchange carbon with the soil they grow in. So plant roots secrete organic acids. So we expect these organic acids to interact with the ash and break it down, right? In return, well, the breaking down of the ash is going to release silicon. And there have been some past studies showing that under increased silicon availability, plants tend to grow bigger. In a sense, our project is unique because it addresses two greatest challenges, I would say, that humanity faces today. One is to mitigate climate change, and we do that through the enhancement of the weathering rate of the ash through its interaction with the plants. On the other hand, we need to increase our food production by 70% in the next, I think, by 2050. So we expect also the release of silicon after the ash breaking down to stimulate the productivity of the plants.
And do you think it might work? Like, do you think you can save the world with volcanic ash and plants?
We will have to see, because there are so many things we still have to explore. For example, in addition to silica, other elements in the volcanic ash like phosphorus and potassium, they are also nutrients to plants. So these are also beneficial to the plant growth. But on the other hand, maybe there is certain element in the volcanic ash that might be toxic to plants as well. So these negative effects also need to be explored.
Plants will likely increase their root productivity. These roots will potentially take up more water, but we're not quite sure. So plants on their leaf surface, they have these tiny pores called stomata through which the exchange of gases takes place. So plants need to have these pores so that carbon dioxide from the atmosphere penetrates the leaves, and then the CO2 is assimilated by the plants. But under high CO2, the number of these pores and the opening of the pores is reduced.
Okay.
At the same time, though, plants in most cases grow bigger. So you have smaller pores, but bigger leaf surfaces. Right. What is going to happen in terms of leaching water leaching through the soil? How is it going to affect the water cycle?
I see. So is that why in the Jurassic era, like the plants were much bigger because there was more CO2 in the atmosphere, maybe? I'm not sure.
I don't know too much about the plant fossil aspect, but in terms of climate, during the Jurassic time, it is especially early Jurassic or Triassic-Jurassic boundary, when CO2 level based on different proxy reconstructions was very high, maybe at the Triassic-Jurassic boundary, potentially up to 2000 ppm. So it's a high CO2 and warm climate. So these would certainly have effect on the plant.
So we talked about how looking at present plants, living plants, can help us understand the past. Also, then, would understanding the past and looking at fossils, I don't know if that's something that you've looked at, Weimu, and how does that help us understand present climate change, for example?
So for my past research in terms of anything related to fossil, then partly to look at the carbon isotopes of carbon isotope ratio of organic matter. With that, I could look at the total organic matter in the rock to see the carbon isotope value evolution through time. And at certain time intervals, especially associated with major carbon cycle perturbations related to large igneous province volcanism or related to massive methane hydrate dissociation, it will cause the changes of the carbon isotope ratios. So by identifying these carbon isotope excursions, we can constrain specific rock record to a specific climatic event, and then use that rock record to further investigate what happened at that time with the geochemical proxies and with the biological proxies.
Yeah, from the rock record, and then how does that then help us to understand the present then?
Yes, so by understanding climate change that happened in the geological past, it allows us to better understand the causing mechanisms and the feedback processes and the Earth system processes for this major climatic change. But one thing to bear in mind is that all those climatic changes that happened in the geological past that we study is not as fast as what is happening now. So certainly there is another aspect of difference that we need to acknowledge. And with the rate of climate change, immediate action really need to be taken, both in terms of reducing the carbon emissions and actively sequester CO2.
We've reached to the point that the current means of energy, like burning fossil fuels, sustain current development is going to have detrimental effects for the future of our kids. And since I have, a newborn daughter, I'm really concerned.
Yeah, I agree. It's very important. I think as well that maybe we should start reducing the amount of things we produce.
Not necessarily reduce it, but just change the way we do things. And I think iCRAG's role in that could be significant. For example, all these new technologies, sustainable energy production technologies, they need minerals, rare earths, they need the elements. iCRAG could actually help, find new mines. And actually, in the recent iCRAG summit, we were divided in teams, and we were asked to come up with a project. And one of the three best projects was about developing these new systems for energy storage. I think these new high-tech batteries.
We had Mark last week. We were talking about this with him.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting.
That's amazing. iCRAG could play a very important role in tackling climate change.
All right. Weimu, tell us a bit more about your background, what you've done before, because you've been to quite a lot of places before, companies or all around the world. We want to know more about your past achievements.
Yeah, so in terms of my past experience, I did my undergraduate and master in Beijing, in Peking University, where I did actually geophysics.
Right.
And then during the last year of my master's degree, I also did an internship with Shell China in Beijing. And with that, I was part of a team where exploration project was being carried out, both in terms of conventional oil and gas exploration, but also unconventionals at a very early stage. And with that, I learned a lot in terms of how oil companies work. And also a lot of my colleagues, they are international staff from the UK or from other European countries. So it's a good experience for me in terms of the culture experience and improving my English.
Yeah.
And by the end of my master degree, I got an offer to do a PhD at Oxford University.
Wow.
And with that, because of my experience in Shell, where I also was exposed to other geologists and geochemists.
Yes.
So I had the opportunity to switch my subjects from geophysics to more geology, geochemistry related. And the project was more the paleoclimate study by looking at black shale formation. They are source rocks for hydrocarbons. Looking at black shales and the organic matter in the black shale, it allows people to better understand the source of rock formation, the quality of the source rock. It also has implications for unconventional hydrocarbons. But my PhD supervisors, their expertise are also in paleoclimate. And during my PhD, I feel that I'm more and more interested in the climate aspect. And subsequently, I worked 1 year as a NERC, the Natural Environment Research Council Knowledge Exchange Fellow, working at the UK Government Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy to look at unconventional oil and gas research landscape to inform evidence-based policy making.
Wow.
And that was, on the one hand, related to hydrocarbon, because the government wanted to evaluate the impact on the environment and the carbon footprint. So with that, I also was involved in the drafting of a national communication report for the UN climate change convention. So it was a really interesting experience for me.
Wow, it seems like you've done a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You've been everywhere.
Oh, so you were working in the government and helping to inform policy. That
Yeah.
sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
And then how was that in terms of how did you find talking to people who weren't, was it always talking to other scientists, or did you, because you were involved in communicating as well?
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that aspect?
So within my team, people are all scientists. But then I also have a lot of opportunities to communicate with policymakers. So you need to make them understand the science context. It's in a way a public communication. And I found that experience quite nice.
And so do you think it's important for scientists to engage in policy making as well?
Research related to climate change, quite relevant to policy. And I think in that sense, it's important to keep the policymakers informed of the newest research, so that on the one hand, to inform them of a future research funding strategy, but also to incorporate them into the policy making.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us then what led you here to Dublin?
I started to look for jobs, and my first job was with iCRAG. And it's really a great opportunity because iCRAG basically combines the whole geoscience community in Ireland. And by working in iCRAG, I get to know so many people and so many different projects that it really inspired me in terms of what I can do. So it's a great start.
Yeah.
Nice. What about you, Harry? What led you to come to Ireland in iCRAG?
Well, I came to Ireland 7 years ago. So I did my undergrad and my PhD in Greece. So back then I was working on, even as an undergrad, I published 2 papers as an undergrad. First author papers. Yeah. So because my 4th year study was not like here, here it's a few months. Back then, in order to finish my 4th year project, I actually worked for 2 years studying the differences in photosynthesis between leaves and stems. So you have seen that many stems are green. This means that they're photosynthetic. So I was looking at the anatomy and the physiology of stems. So I continued with my PhD, and then I applied for this postdoc on an ERC project that would study the interaction between the atmospheric change and plant evolution.
We have questions from Twitter, and Mark Collan, that we had last week, actually sent us a question. For Ireland, what do you think are our best options for carbon sequestration, geological or biological, and why?
Yeah, so I guess there are several options. Like, for example, there are reports evaluating the different carbon sequestration or the so-called greenhouse gas removal technologies, and all of them have their positive and negative sides. So I guess in order to sequester CO2 in large scale, we probably want to apply several of them in order to achieve our goal. And one of the things that come into my mind is like peatland restoration and coastal wetland restoration. And I think that is very relevant to Ireland and has a huge potential there. So something could be done there. And grow more trees. It's another carbon sequestration process.
Makes sense.
And maybe use the wood to build houses so that they can be stored. And then the land is available to grow more trees as well. And
It's a very complex issue. Ireland is doing well in growing more trees. I mean, in the 1900s, only 1% of Ireland's landmass consisted of forests. At the moment, I think it's in the range of 11-13%. There is, of course, yeah, we can increase.
I thought it was less, actually.
Yeah, it is 11-13 because there is this massive afforestation project. But we don't really plant the broad-leaved species that you would find in Ireland in the old times. We grow mainly Sitka spruce. So it is a way out. And actually, there was this recent paper published in Nature, I think, showing that we could actually reverse climate change by planting, I don't remember how many billions of trees around the world. It is a way out of the problem. However, where are these trees going to be planted on? They're going to be planted on soil that is currently used for animals, right?
Yeah.
So, and you can't expect, even if you start growing trees, you can't expect to have any income in the next, I don't know,
well, I guess
20 years.
The first thing would be to stop cutting the trees in the Amazon. That would be
exactly.
Good.
But for Ireland, there are no clear solutions because it's so complicated, because Ireland is so heavily dependent on the agricultural sector.
We could just eat less meat as well.
That
would help.
It would. But it's a societal, environmental, and economical problem.
Do you have another question?
Yeah. What's your favorite plant?
My favorite plant? That's a good question. I've never thought about that. I guess it's Xanthedeschia aethiopica. Probably you've heard of her. It's the calla lily. It's calla lily.
Calla lily.
Calla lily. Yeah, it originates from South Africa, but it's a plant that used to be given to brides from the grooms in the past. So it's a lily. You've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. It's my favorite plant because it has followed me throughout my career. So I started to work with her in Greece 10 years ago, and I'm still processing the data of calla lily right now, right before the podcast from my previous project.
Nice. It's a nice name as well. It reminds me of a plant I got to know in New Zealand, and it's called kawakawa.
Kawakawa.
Yeah.
Actually,
it's a medicinal plant, kind of.
Well, calla lily is a poisonous plant. Mildly poisonous. So, yeah.
And then, Weimu, your favorite either fossil or geological time period?
Jurassic.
No hesitation.
Ammonites.
Ammonites are great, yeah.
They are. Did you find some when you were doing field work?
Yes, yeah. So there were loads of ammonites along the Dorset Jurassic coast. So it's really a nice place to be, just hunting for ammonites. Yeah.
So tell us about your holiday plans.
Yeah. So I'm heading to Greece tomorrow.
Oh.
My wife and my newborn baby are there. For a month now. So I'm gonna join them. I have missed them a lot.
Yeah. That's another aspect of the intensity of the experiment. So Harry's daughter was born just around the time when we started the experiment. And he also hasn't really taken any time off since the baby was born. So it was quite intense as well. And the last month he was not with the baby.
Wow. It is funny.
Tomorrow, finally.
Yeah, my daughter was born at 4 a.m. on Thursday, on the 21st of March. And at 9 a.m. I gave a talk at the school. They had the project, and they wanted a scientist to talk to them about climate change. I think it was organized by SFI. So I was like, all right, my baby's born now. The midwives took her from me. So I better go to the school and give my talk.
That's a very dedicated
scientist.
So you'll be delighted tomorrow.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Where can people find you on social media?
Well,
Twitter.
Twitter, yeah.
Which you already added us on your Twitter post. So people can find us there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Weimu and Harry, for coming in.
Thank you very much.
It was our pleasure.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, see you. Bye. In the next episode.